Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Branislav. I'm an engineering leader at Platform SH. I'm also an engineer. I'm a father. I'm a husband. And I am a waste reduction nerd, which is something that is going to come handy in this presentation. And I'm going to talk about performance optimization today and what strategies could organizations apply in order to optimize their processes. And before we start, how many of you are managers? How many of you are engineers who kind of tend to become managers? Everybody else, pretty much. How many of you are DevOps? Good, good. You're at the right place. So, how many of you know who's this? So, well, this is funny. This is Bruce McLaren. So, born in 1937, died in 1970. He was a pioneer of racing sports, and he created some of the most amazing, most advanced cars in the history of mankind, pretty much. And even after his death, his team continued, McLaren, continued winning, and they won 8 constructors and 12 drivers championships in Formula One. And they know a thing or two about making highly performant machines. There is a problem, though. These machines are absolute snowflakes. What does it mean? Think about starting up a Formula One. In order to start the Formula One, you're not turning the key. You're instead attaching the Formula One to a machine, external machine, which then heats the oil. Once the oil is at the right temperature, they kind of start pumping the oil into the car and slowly lubricating and heating up the engine. This is done by a ton of technicians, and they're using some really powerful computers, and they're being supervised by engine starting supervisor, which is an actual profession in the world. Once he gives a go, they're actually ready to start the engine. As I said, highly specialized machine and the snowflake. What is the best-selling car in the world? It's not a McLaren. It's a Toyota Corolla. And since its inception in the 60s, Toyota Corolla was sold in more than 50 million units. And Toyota, as a producer, does much better than McLaren. And when you think about it, Ford, Volkswagen, pretty much every single manufacturer of a car you drive today performs better than McLaren. And why so? Meet this guy here. His name was Eiji Toyoda, and he was born in 1913 and lived 100 years. And he was a Japanese industrialist and chairman of Toyota. His story is really interesting, right? After the World War, he was invited by Americans to visit the production facilities of Ford and try to understand the mass production and organization of such a huge factory. So he returned to a struggling factory of Toyota, which was producing sometimes more than 1,000 cars monthly, and he tried to implement better processes. He invented something they called Toyota Way, and as part of the Toyota Way, he introduced 2 techniques. One of them is Kanban, and who doesn't use Kanban here? 1 person. 2. 3 people. Okay. And he actually co-authored that process. Another one is Kaizen. And I'm going to be talking about Kaizen today. Kai means change. Zen means good. So it's a good change or an improvement. And this is a methodology that prefers continuous improvement. Constant improvement in small steps, without huge innovations, without revolutions, without drastic changes. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? Once a huge team or huge company introduce a huge change, that stops the production line, that stops the process, that makes everything a little bit more difficult for people. And then you need to slowly bootstrap the processes once, from the scratch. And this methodology also prefers processes, which means familiarity. If you have a good documentation, if you have familiar environment, that's the place where you can express your creativity. And finally, it has a huge goal of automation. Why automation? Well, because it's good. And it's founded on 10 principles, right? And those principles are all about making an informed decision. So it is really important to disrupt the status quo, but in small incremental steps. Perfectionism does not have a place in such organization where you're going to reach that goal, but one step at a time, slowly. This process fosters analytical thinking, and it taps into a collective knowledge of all the individuals working in an organization. It focuses on the economics of change, which pretty much means that I need to find the smallest possible or easiest possible leverage, change that, and hope that it's going to give me the best possible result. And finally, the 10th bullet, which some of you do not see here, is never stop implementing, which translates to programming languages means go to one. It's perpetual, it's cyclic, it's forever, and every single cycle should bring a little bit more to an organization. In practice, it looks like this. First, you are planning, right? Trying to understand, define the problem, trying to suggest solutions, and trying to suggest the measures that are going to help you understand whether you achieved the solution you wanted to. Then you're implementing the plan, and during the implementation, you're also testing the small changes, making sure that you're on the right place. Once you're done, you're checking, evaluating all the data received. You are making sure that deviations between what you expected and what you got are not huge. And finally, and this is really important, you need to standardize. You need to ensure that the changes you introduced propagated throughout the organization. And what is the goal? The goal is to increase performance by reducing waste. What is waste? Think about wasted time. Think about all the meetings you were in where you were not really needed or where you needed to do something else. Think about all the work you needed to do that needed to be scrapped because it was either duplicate or irrelevant. Think about if you're in manufacturing. Who here is in manufacturing for any reason? Nobody. Okay. But you can imagine, like wasted materials and resources you're using to build a product. Or for the rest of us, which is pretty much the entire room, wasted electricity, CPU, RAM, storage, bandwidth, everything that makes our hosting more expensive. So we are trying to increase the performance, but how can we know that we actually increased it? How can we know that we are actually at a good place? Well, according to the State of the DevOps review, who reads that thing, by the way? Hands up. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. So according to State of the DevOps review, that pretty much repeats every single year, and every single year since 7 or 8 years ago, they're pretty much saying deployment frequency is what you should look at. Deployment frequency and lead time to recover. What is the idea? You should not deploy every single month or every single week, even every single day. You should deploy when that deployment is required, whenever, on demand. You should not avoid failure, because the best way to avoid failure is pretty much not to do anything. You should make sure that once you fail, you're able to recover quickly. And highly performant teams are those that are recovering in less than 1 hour. And the latest State of the DevOps review actually says that calls those teams balanced teams. And pretty much it says that build teams that have high performance and high organizational performance, but also high job satisfaction and low burnout, which is a new thing in this year's report, are balanced. They're using technology in a sustainable way, and therefore they are performing highly. Let me repeat this. High performance deploy more frequently. This is the measure to look at. Mean time between errors is absolutely irrelevant. Recovery after an error is something that we need to strive to. If we wanted to really roughly categorize everything we need to do, all the capabilities, in order to be high performant, what we should look at is technical capabilities, obviously. We need to make sure that our processes are lean and well adapted, and also we need to find a way to make people feel safe. And this is a concept called generative culture, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But let's start with technical capabilities, the most obvious thing ever. The idea is teams that are empowering, employing high technical, highly modern technical skill sets, they're performing better. Teams that automate stuff that can be automated are also performing better. And our job is to kind of identify where we can improve and use Kaizen to actually improve. So the first important thing, cut ties with the legacy technology. Kind of obvious. If you're running on unsupported runtime versions, who here runs on PHP 8 or less? You have a problem. Unsupported application versions, right? Unsupported dependencies, redundant technologies, or just imagine data models that are just not suiting your needs. How many times did you have to say to your business stakeholders, you know what, I cannot do it because my database does not allow it? We have a problem. And of course, tight coupling and everything else. All of these are problems that are slowing you down. We can also call it technical debt if you want. And the technical debt is usually a consequence of, multiple factors, but one of them I want to stress out is sticking to a technology stack. And instead, we should maybe think about architecture a little bit more. So the idea is, think about applying cloud-friendly, cloud-native design patterns or architecture patterns. Start with loosely coupled architecture. I'm not necessarily talking about microservices, but why not? Microservices as well. Start thinking about small batches of improvement, not one big thing that, once it's deployed, it can fail terribly, and you cannot really test it because it's so huge. No, small increments. Of course, continuous integration, delivery, and finally deployment is super helpful if you're able to do that, and that's your goal. I'm going to try to stress out one thing, which is immutable containers. Who here hosts on immutable containers? A handful of people. Do you like it? Everybody's like, nah. Nah, not really. So immutable containers are super important because they are guaranteeing the integrity of your application once it's live. So, and of course, think about all the APIs you can develop to connect the application and design it in a way that's going to be anti-fragile. What does it really mean? It means that it withstands individual failures or, quirky whatever, and allows you, even when the failure happens, to quickly recover. And the next step you can do is pretty much reduce waste through standardization. What does that mean? Think about all the operating systems an organization have, and think about licensing costs and maintenance costs of everything your organization needs to maintain. Think about development standards that if they are different from the application to application you are maintaining, you're having huge difficulties moving people from one application to another, making cross-functional teams. You have difficulties onboarding new people because, long processes. Merge request reviews are being reviewed much slower because people need to adapt to individual coding standards, etc. All of the standardization needs to have one final goal. Once you're standardized, you can automate, and this is super important. Automate everything. In hosting and in DevOps, that pretty much means production-like environments for testing purposes. And in order to achieve that, we introduced the infrastructure as a code, and that's already a relatively well-known concept, where the idea is to provision the recipe, to have the recipe for provisioning of the infrastructure in a file, in code, and that code can be revisioned then. All of the code can be tracked through version control. You have ability to fine-tune your infrastructure as you wish or as you need. Think about Black Fridays of the world. And this, next to last bullet point, it's super important. Your deployment to production should not be the first production deployment. Who knows what that means? One person. Okay, so you need to make sure that the marriage of the changes that you're making with the state of the infrastructure, state of the code, and state of the system in general, so database, caches, etc., works. But in order to make sure that it works, you need to make a clone of the infrastructure. You need to make a one-to-one, byte-to-byte code of production application, production service, in an environment where you're allowed to do testing. That's super important. So you have that. It's all good, it runs, but it's super difficult to maintain. Some of you are already visualizing Kubernetes and stuff. Well, commodification is the end goal. What does that mean? It means I can get whatever I want in terms of infrastructure, on-demand, self-service right now. I'm working for a company that already provides that for you. It's Platform as Sage and its newest product, Upsun. And that's the first pillar. Let's talk about the second pillar, which is lean processes. What's that? You need your rituals, right? You need processes, but processes should be designed in such a way that are focusing effort on bringing value to the customers. That's your main goal. Whatever you're doing that's not bringing value, you're wasting. So first thing that you should need to work on is pretty much focus on users. In order to focus on users, you can apply multiple techniques. What we learned that works really good for us is cross-functional initiatives. They're allowing teams to make decisions when needed in their own micro-universe, and they do not need to play the escalation game to manager, managers, manager, etc. Let's talk about that in details. So State of the DevOps report, for the first time ever, said that teams that have strong user focus have 40% higher organizational performance. 40% is huge. Cross-functional initiatives are actually one way to do that, and they are allowing organizations that have relatively rigid structures, relatively rigid division in teams, to assemble people from various teams, give them a thing to work on, and give them the infrastructure necessary to do their work. At Platform as Sage, we introduced the concept of product trio, which pretty much means that a product manager, a product designer, and the lead engineer together work on bringing a new feature. Who wants to know more about that? Stay just after this session. We are going to be talking a lot about that. And the idea is, bring whoever you want or whoever you need in order to get the job done. Product manager makes sure that you are focusing on the user. Product designer makes sure that whatever you're building is beautiful and amazing. And lead engineer, of course, make sure that the solution you're building is fitting into overall engineering structure or design. I have a description. I'm not going to focus too much on these slides. You're going to have a link to the slides in the end of the session. What is the goal? The goal is to make decisions at the right place. And as I said, to avoid the telephone game in the organization. How can you do that? Well, again, you're making sure that the team has everything they need in order to deliver. One of the things is, as I said before, dedicated development environments, ability to play with the infrastructure, ability to ensure that everything works before merging to staging, and finally in production. And then people have enough time to work on important things, such as documentation, which is absolutely foundational for successful organizations. There are some tools. Some of you are probably already using them: Confluence, Gitbook, Read-the-Box, Sphinx Guru, to manage documentation within an organization and within teams. And they can focus on providing efficient code reviews and the culture of feedback. And let's talk about the final pillar, which is generative culture. Culture is absolute key driver of employees' well-being. And I listed just a handful of important things you need to care when designing or working on culture, right? You need to care about psychological safety. You need to care about ensuring open and quality communication. You need to make sure that your colleagues are able to actually learn and exchange information. And all of that is being done through the process of generative culture. Generative culture is, okay, who read about generative culture here? This should require its own session. But pretty much the idea is Westrum categorizes culture in 3 different types. Pathologic, which pretty much is culture that is driven by fear and threat. Bureaucratic, where culture is driven by delivery of value through turfs. This is my turf, my team, and my department. And generative culture, which pretty much focuses on the mission of the organization. And we are all working together in order to deliver a value. The lead measurement is performance of the organization, not individual performance. And in reality, and this is the final State of the DevOps report number I'm going to share with you. Burnout, which is one of the major reasons for decreased performance of the teams, is reduced by 61% due to high levels of job security. And in order to continue supporting your colleagues at being great, you need to ensure that mission of the organization is what we put focus on. And it's easier to have focus on mission when management is done through trust and not control. And that is being done if you start promoting others and not yourself in the organization. Because in the end, you should remember one thing. High-performing teams are not stars, are not made of single amazing stars. They're made of constellations that just work together. Thank you so much. I'm Branislav. These slides are available on slides.bujisic.com. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that somebody's going to tweet about them. So yes. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes. I'm absolutely unable to throw this thing that far, so There we go.
Hello. Hello. In the initial slides, you mentioned that the Japanese guy was against innovation, but also in the generative thingy, innovation was in the list. So how do you see this balance between innovation but continuous improvement?
Innovate where you can automate. So that's the main goal, right? And innovation happens, but not in revolutions, in small incremental steps, one step at a time, really slowly. Anyone else? Nope. Well, thank you so much.